What if I told you that a man once invented an entire country from scratch, complete with a national anthem, government, and even a capital city? Also, he could scam investors and send real people on ships to colonize this fake paradise. That's exactly what over 250 people did in the 1820s. They believe in a place called Poyais, a place that never existed. Behind it all was a man named Gregor MacGregor, a name you've probably never heard of. But in the world of history's most dangerous scammers, he sits at the very top. He didn't just forge papers or lie to a few investors. He invented an entire nation, created a government, printed currency, sold fake land, and sent real people to their deaths. This is the story of the most elaborate fraud the world has ever seen, and how one man sold a fake kingdom to the British Empire and got away with it. Make sure to hit like, subscribe to Mystery Junkie, and comment below. What's the most mind-blowing scam you've ever heard of? Let's dive into the dark genius of Gregor MacGregor. Gregor MacGregor was born in December 1786 in Scotland, into a family of minor nobility, but not one of significant wealth. From a young age, he seemed destined for something grander. He was ambitious, well-spoken, and according to accounts from the time, extremely charming. He joined the British Army at just 16 years old and served in the Napoleonic Wars. But Gregor wasn't content being a simple soldier. After resigning his British commission, he headed to South America, just as revolutions were breaking out across the continent against the Spanish Empire. There, he joined the independence movement and fought alongside legendary leaders like Simón Bolívar. He quickly gained rank, styled himself as a general, and began telling stories of great victories. But even these stories were likely exaggerated. He began calling himself the Cazique of Poyais, a title meaning chief or prince, and by the time he returned to Britain in 1821, he wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a ruler of a new nation. Poyais didn't exist, but you wouldn't know it if you were alive in 1822 London. MacGregor described Poyais as a constitutional monarchy located on the Mosquito Coast of Central America, bordered by Honduras and Nicaragua. He claimed it had rich soil, rolling hills, rivers filled with gold, and a modern capital city called St. Joseph, with European-style buildings, churches, banks, and even an opera house. He even said the Poyaisian people had a written constitution, a working government, and had chosen him to be their leader. To back up these lies, MacGregor printed detailed maps, created a Poyais flag, published a 355-page guidebook describing the land's laws and economic potential, and claimed the British Crown had officially recognized the nation. He forged letters from supposed governors and mayors, created fake government offices, and began handing out titles like Baron of Poyais and Knight of the Order of the Green Cross. He set up a Poyaisian embassy in London, hired clerks, printed land certificates, and began selling official government bonds. And it worked. People believed him. MacGregor was a master at exploiting dreams. The 1820s were a golden era for investment. The British public was buzzing with news of newly independent countries in South America, and banks were hungry to lend. People were desperate for ways to get rich quickly, and Central America was considered the next frontier. MacGregor took advantage of that frenzy. He began offering land in Poyais for sale, 4 shillings an acre, a bargain for what he claimed was the most fertile land on earth. He issued Poyais bonds backed by the nation's supposed economic strength, promising generous interest. He courted merchants, military men, and even members of the British nobility. Many were eager to get in early and become rich from Poyaisian exports, mining, and agriculture. Then came the real horror. In 1822, MacGregor organized ships to transport settlers to Poyais. About 250 people boarded the Honduras packet and Kennersley Castle, believing they were headed to a new life in a wealthy tropical utopia. Entire families liquidated everything they had to buy land and traveled to their new home. They brought farming tools, books, furniture, even musical instruments, ready to build a new society. They had no idea what was waiting for them. When the settlers arrived at the supposed site of St. Joseph, they were stunned. There was no city, no port, no government buildings, no roads, not even a single house. Just thick jungle, biting insects, and the unforgiving terrain of the Mosquito Coast. At first, many believed they had simply landed in the wrong spot. They scouted the coastline, searched the forests, waited for local authorities to arrive. But the grim truth slowly began to sink in. There was no Poyais. The land was uninhabitable, and there was no sign of civilization, because it had never existed. The settlers were stranded, with no food supply, no medical care, and no way home. Then came disease. Tropical illnesses like malaria and yellow fever spread rapidly. People died by the dozens. By the time a British rescue ship finally arrived, over 180 settlers had died. Many of the bodies were never recovered, lost to the jungle they thought was a new beginning. Back in London, the Poyais scam began to unravel. As word from the survivors trickled back across the Atlantic, journalists and officials began to question the sovereign nation MacGregor had sold to investors. Several survivors gave shocking testimonies, and multiple families launched legal actions. But Gregor MacGregor wasn't in Britain anymore. He had fled to France, where, incredibly, he attempted to launch the same scam all over again. This time, he printed French versions of the Poyais guidebook, created fake French government approvals, and began pitching the nation to wealthy Parisians. He was eventually arrested by French authorities in 1826 and charged with fraud. But somehow, he managed to beat the case. With forged letters, smooth talking, and a web of technicalities, MacGregor was acquitted and released. And he wasn't done yet. After escaping justice in France, MacGregor returned to Britain in the late 1820s. He again tried to revive interest in Poyais, now offering new land bonds, updated maps, and a new narrative. That Poyais had survived its early struggles and was now back on track. But this time, the public was wary. The financial markets had crashed in 1825 due to a speculative bubble, partly caused by schemes like Poyais, and people were no longer eager to throw their savings into exotic ventures. Still, MacGregor found a few believers and continued selling minor land grants throughout the 1830s. It wasn't until the 1838 that MacGregor finally gave up the scam entirely. He moved to Venezuela, claiming he wanted to retire quietly. Unbelievably, the Venezuelan government, recognizing his past military service, granted him a pension. He lived out his final years in Caracas as a respected veteran, not a con man. He died in 1845, buried with full military honors. No mention of the victims, no justice ever served. So how did Gregor MacGregor pull off one of the most dangerous and deadly scams in history, and still walk away untouched? The answer is both terrifying and fascinating. MacGregor's genius wasn't in his forgery. It was in his understanding of belief. He knew that if you give people something they desperately want, a paradise, a promise, a golden future, they'll overlook red flags, ignore logic, and even risk death. He wasn't just a fraud. He was a storyteller. Everything he created, the maps, the currency, the flags, the guidebooks, they weren't just props. They were world-building tools. He engineered belief by flooding the market with official-looking materials that made Poyais feel real. Combine that with his military background, exotic war stories, and aristocratic presence, and you had a con man people wanted to follow. And let's not forget, the legal system of the time was not designed to handle international fraud. There were no Interpol warrants, no financial crime task forces. MacGregor slipped through the cracks of empire and into the history books. Gregor MacGregor's Poyais scam wasn't just a product of its time. It was a blueprint, a chilling foreshadowing of scams we still see today. From fake crypto coins to pump and dump stocks, from sketchy real estate kingdoms in faraway countries to influencers selling digital land in the metaverse. It's all the same game. Sell the dream, cloak it in confidence, prey on belief. MacGregor's tactics still echo in today's headlines. But perhaps the most disturbing part of his story is how easily people followed him. Educated investors, military officers, entire families. They trusted him not because he forced them, but because he made them want to believe. And when that belief cost them everything, homes, children, lives, there was no justice. That should make us uncomfortable. because it shows how vulnerable even the smartest among us can be when hope is on the table. His scam may be over 200 years old, but its core lesson still applies. Never trust a dream sold too perfectly, because sometimes that golden city you're headed toward might just be a death trap in disguise, and the man selling it might already be on a boat, headed to his next victims.